Okay, so you're here because, let's be honest, GMP implementation, it can feel pretty overwhelming
All
sometimes.
right, totally.
Uh,
Especially when you're trying to make sure you're doing everything by the book,
yeah.
really getting it right.
Yeah, exactly. But that's what we're all about here on the deep dive. We want to cut through all the noise and give you the actual practical insights that make a difference.
Yeah, and for this deep dive, we're going to focus on a really interesting example. It's called Case Study 2.
Okay.
We actually talked about it in Season 7, Episode 5. But this time, we're going to really dig deep into how this particular company managed to implement GMP so effectively.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, did a great case study because they really nailed those three key pillars: strong quality systems, thorough training, and a real commitment to continuous improvement.
And I think for our listeners, it's helpful to know that we didn't just pull this information out of thin air. We
Right.
actually looked at a whole bunch of different sources.
Did-
We've got the regulations themselves, like 21 CFR parts 110 and 111, which are like the GMP Bibles for food and dietary supplements. And then we've also got global guidelines like the ICHQ series.
Yeah, the ICHQ series is really important because it gives you that international perspective on quality standards, which is essential these days.
Absolutely. And then we've got all sorts of practical advice from GMP handbooks. And of course, we're bringing in everything we've learned from past deep dive conversations about GMP principles and audits.
Yeah, we've had some great discussions on those topics.
Right. So we've really tried to cover all the bases here.
And the thing is, the thing that all these sources keep coming back to is the fundamental goal of GMP, right? It's all about making sure that every single product, every batch is top-notch quality,
Mhm.
and that everything you do meets those strict compliance standards.
Consistency and quality. That's the name of the game.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's jump into this case study.
Okay.
The first thing that really struck me was how this company prioritized their quality systems.
Oh, absolutely. It's like building a house.
Yeah.
You need a solid foundation, and that's what a strong quality system provides.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And, one of the most basic but crucial parts of any quality system is documentation.
Ah, documentation.
Love it or hate it. It's absolutely essential.
It's got to be done.
And 21 CFR Part 111.180B1, it spells it out very clearly. You need written procedures for every single aspect of your operations.
No cutting corners?
So if it's not documented, it didn't happen. Remember that phrase?
Oh, yeah. I remember that came up in a YouTube discussion about GMP's labs, I think.
Yeah, it really drives home the point.
It does.
You can't just rely on people's memories or assumptions. You need that clear written record.
And it can't be an afterthought either.
Oh, no, definitely not.
Trying to scribble things down after the fact.
Right.
It's not going to fly.
That same YouTube video actually emphasized that documentation needs to happen in real time as you're doing the work.
Oh, so important.
It is, because
Yeah.
that way you could be sure that it's accurate and complete.
It's like that old saying, the palest ink is better than the best memory.
That's a good one.
So true.
And then building on that idea of meticulous documentation, we've got these things called master production and control records.
Ah, yes, the master records?
21 CFR 211.186 lays it all out. They're like the ultimate recipe book for your product.
So they're basically like a blueprint.
Exactly. They contain everything you need to know about making that product.
Name strength, a complete list of ingredients with exact quantities.
Yep.
The expected yield, even details about the packaging materials.
All of it, even step-by-step instructions for every single stage of manufacturing and quality control.
Wow, that's a lot of detail.
It is, but it's necessary because that level of detail is what ensures that each batch of your product is identical to the last.
It's all about consistency.
Exactly. So that when a patient or a consumer uses your product, they know exactly what they're getting every single time.
Makes perfect sense.
Now, another key element that we've talked about before is process validation.
Right, so this is where you actually prove that your manufacturing process consistently produces a high-quality product.
Exactly. It's not enough to just have a procedure written down.
Yeah.
You need to have data that shows it actually works in practice.
It's all about the evidence.
Right.
Okay, so we've got our documentation in order, we've validated our processes. What's next?
Well, we need to talk about specifications, and this is where the data and standards really come into play.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So specifications are basically like a set of criteria that your product has to meet.
So it's not just about doing tests, it's about setting clear limits for those tests.
Exactly. You need to define what the acceptable range is for each quality attribute you're measuring.
Okay, and how do you go about setting those limits?
Well, that's where you do your research. You need to understand the science behind your product and what factors can impact its quality.
And then based on that research, you establish those acceptance criteria.
And when you introduce a new test procedure,
Hmm.
you can't just assume it's going to work perfectly right off the bat.
Right, you need to make sure it's reliable.
Exactly. You need to validate it to prove that it's accurate, sensitive, specific, and reproducible.
So accurate means it's measuring what it's supposed to measure.
Yeah.
Sensitive means it can detect even small amounts of what you're looking for.
Right.
Specific means it's not going to be confused by other substances.
Exactly. And reproducible means you're going to get consistent results every time you run the test.
It's like making sure your measuring tools are properly calibrated.
Exactly. You want to be confident in the data you're getting.
Now, even if you're using a well-established test method, something from an official compendium like the USP, you still need to verify it right.
That's right, because even those standard methods might need some tweaking depending on your specific lab conditions and the equipment you're using.
Okay, so you're basically confirming that it works properly in your specific setup.
Exactly.
And 21 CFR Part 212B actually talks about this verification process.
It does.
Okay, so we've got our documentation, our validated processes, our clear specifications. It's starting to sound like a pretty solid quality system.
It is. But there's one more crucial piece we needed to add.
Okay, what's that?
The quality control unit.
Ah, yes, the QC team.
These are the folks who are really the guardians of quality. They're the ones who review all the data, make sure everything is in spec, and investigate any deviations or complaints.
They're like the detectives of the GMP world.
That's a good way to put it.
They're the ones who get to the bottom of things.
And 21 CFR 211.198A, it actually highlights their role in reviewing complaints and deciding if a full-blown investigation is necessary.
So they're the ones who determine if something is just a minor hiccup or a major problem.
Exactly. They're the ones who make the call.
Okay, so we've covered the quality systems, the documentation, the validation, the specifications, the QC team. It sounds like we've got a pretty solid foundation now.
We do, but remember we talked about those 3 key pillars.
Right. Strong quality systems, thorough training, and continuous improvement.
Exactly. So now let's move on to training.
Okay, so how did this company, in our case study, approach training?
Well, unfortunately, our case study doesn't actually give us a ton of detail about their specific training program,
Okay.
but we can infer a lot from other sources. For example, we looked at a GDP webinar transcript, and it emphasized the importance of having competent staff just as much as having the right facilities and equipment.
Right. It all goes hand in hand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You could have the most state-of-the-art manufacturing plant in the world.
But if the people running it don't know what they're doing,
Exactly. It's all for nothing.
it's like having a Formula One car, but putting a learner driver behind the wheel.
Okay, I can see that analogy.
You need skilled and knowledgeable people to operate those complex systems safely and effectively.
Makes perfect sense.
And something that really resonated with me from a Season 1 discussion was the idea that GMP isn't just about checking boxes and following procedures.
It's about building a quality culture.
Exactly. It's about creating an environment where everyone understands why quality matters and why GMP is so important. It's about instilling that sense of pride in doing things right.
Yes, and making quality a shared value throughout the organization.
So it's not just about telling people what to do. It's about helping them understand why they're doing it.
Precisely. You want to empower your employees to make good decisions, even when no one is looking over their shoulder.
Okay, so we've got our strong quality systems, and we've got a well-trained, quality-focused team. What's the third piece of the puzzle?
Continuous improvement.
Ah, yes, that's the key to staying ahead of the game.
It is, because GMP isn't a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process of constantly striving to do better.
And how do you actually achieve continuous improvement?
Well, one of the most effective tools is internal audits.
Ah, internal audits.
I know they might not sound like the most exciting thing.
But they're so important.
They are, because they help you identify any weaknesses in your quality management system and ensure that all your processes are actually working as intended.
It's like a regular checkup for your GMP system.
Exactly. You're looking for any potential issues
Yeah.
before they become major problems.
Yeah. And if those internal audits or even external inspections do uncover some areas for improvement, what happens then?
Well, that's where corrective and preventive actions come in, or KPA, as it's often called.
KPA, yes, we've talked about that before.
We went into a lot of detail in seasons 6 and 8.
Yeah.
We even discussed a whole book dedicated to KPA.
So it's clearly a big deal.
It is, because KPI is more than just putting a Band-Aid on a problem.
It's about getting to the root cause.
Exactly. You need to understand why the issue happened in the first place so you can prevent it from happening again.
So it's about identifying the problem, fixing it in the short term, and then putting measures in place to prevent it from recurring.
Exactly. And that KPA book, we mentioned it, actually suggested a time frame of 2 to 4 weeks for developing a comprehensive KPA plan.
So it's not a quick fix, it's a thoughtful and thorough process.
It is because you want to make sure you're addressing the issue in a sustainable way.
So KPA is all about learning from your mistakes and constantly improving your processes.
Exactly. And along with Kimikia, another key aspect of continuous improvement is knowledge management.
Knowledge management. So that's all about capturing and sharing lessons learned and best practices, right?
Exactly, because you don't want to keep reinventing the wheel
Yeah.
every time you encounter a new challenge.
Right. You want to learn from your experiences and make that knowledge accessible to everyone in the organization.
And then paired with knowledge management, we have quality risk management.
Risk management. Okay, so that's all about proactively identifying and mitigating potential risks.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is how these two concepts, knowledge management and quality risk management, work together.
How so?
Well, when you have a good system for capturing and sharing knowledge, you're better equipped to identify potential risks because you're drawing on the collective experience of the entire organization.
So you're not just relying on one person's perspective, you're getting input from multiple sources.
Exactly. And then once you've identified those risks, you can use your knowledge and expertise to develop effective mitigation strategies.
So it's about being proactive rather than reactive.
Precisely, you want to anticipate potential problems and put measures in place to prevent them from happening in the first place.
And this risk-based thinking, it's not just a one-time thing either, right?
No, definitely not. It's an ongoing iterative process.
So as you gain more experience and gather more data, you need to revisit and reassess those risks.
Exactly, because the risk landscape is constantly evolving.
And this idea of risk management, it actually extends to the concept of design space.
Oh yes, design space is fascinating.
Tell more.
Well, basically, design space is about defining a safe operating zone for your manufacturing process.
A safe operating zone.
Okay, I like that.
So it's about understanding how different input materials and process parameters can affect the final product quality.
And then based on that understanding, you define a range of conditions where you can be confident that the product will meet its specifications.
Exactly. And this design space is informed by scientific studies, risk assessments, and all the knowledge you've accumulated about your process. So it's not just a guess, it's based on solid data and analysis.
Precisely. It's about making informed decisions that are grounded in science and risk management principles.
So ultimately, it's all about making those strategic decisions that ensure consistent product quality.
Exactly. And speaking of decisions, we need to talk about how risk management informs decision-making in general.
Okay, how so?
Well, when you have a good understanding of the risks involved, you can make more informed choices about how to manage those risks.
So you're not just reacting to problems, you're proactively planning for them.
Right. And one of the keys to effective decision-making in a quality system is considering three factors:
Okay, what are those?
the probability of the risk occurring, the potential harm it could cause, and the severity of that harm.
So it's like a risk-benefit analysis.
Exactly. You're weighing the potential downsides against the potential benefits.
And this risk-based approach, it's not just limited to decision-making, it also plays a role in investigations, right?
Absolutely. Because when a deviation occurs, you need to investigate it thoroughly to understand what happened and why.
And we talked about this earlier, but the equipment you're using and the data it generates, those are crucial pieces of the puzzle.
They are, because that data can provide valuable clues about what went wrong.
Things like temperature charts, pressure readings, even the audit trails in electronic systems, those can all tell a story.
Exactly. And that's why data integrity is so important.
Data integrity, yes. That's about making sure your data is accurate, complete, and reliable.
Right. And there are 5 key principles of data integrity: attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original, and accurate.
LCOA.
Exactly. Those principles help ensure that your data is trustworthy and can be relied upon to make sound decisions.
So ultimately, thorough investigations informed by reliable data lead to those corrective actions, the KPA we talked about earlier.
Exactly. And that cycle of identifying, correcting, and preventing is what drives continuous improvement.
So it's like a feedback loop that helps you constantly learn and grow. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways for our listeners? What are the essential ingredients for successful GMP implementation?
Well, I think it's clear that it's not just about following the checklist or ticking boxes.
It's about creating a culture of quality.
Exactly. It's about having a system in place that is built on strong quality principles and a commitment to continuous improvement.
So it starts with that robust and meticulously maintained documentation that we talked about at the beginning.
Yes. And then you need well-defined processes that are consistently followed and validated.
And of course, you need a team of competent and well-trained individuals who are all committed to quality.
And don't forget that proactive mindset of identifying and mitigating potential risks. That's crucial.
Risk management is key.
It is.
And then to ensure that you're constantly improving, you need those regular internal audits and a robust CAMPA system.
Exactly. Those are the mechanisms that keep your quality system running smoothly.
And it's important to remember that GMP isn't just about following rules for the sake of following rules.
Right. It's about understanding the underlying principles and applying them in a way that makes sense for your specific organization.
And ultimately, it's all about producing high-quality products that are safe and effective for the people who use them.
Exactly.
So as you're listening to this, think about how these principles of documentation, risk management, and quality can be applied in other areas of your life.
Because these principles, they're not just relevant to the pharmaceutical industry. They can be applied to any situation where consistency and reliability are important.
Absolutely. And if you're interested in learning more about the specific regulations or guidelines we mentioned, we encourage you to do your own research.
There are tons of resources available online and in libraries.
And as always, we're here to help, so feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions.
Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
We'll see you next time.
Bye for now.
Bye.